Now, typically, innovations result from a conscious and purposeful search for innovation opportunities. These opportunities are found only in a few situations, such as change in the industry structure, demographics, or in the perception of an industry and appearance of new knowledge. All these can be found today in the wealth management industry. An increasing number of fintechs active in wealth management are disrupting traditional industry structures. Our next panel will converse and discuss about embracing technology for a successful and sustainable wealth management. Moderating this session from our studio is Vikrant Varshini, founding member and convener at Hyderabad Fintech Forum. Joining Vikrant at the studio, we have Vidushi Agrawal, founder at Mitra Money. And joining the panel through our virtual platform, we have Abhishek Chandra, Chief Technology Officer, IIFL Wealth Management, Vineet Narsimhan, founder and Chief Technology Officer, Crystal.ai, Saugata Basu, founder at CashRich, and Subramanya SV, co-founder at Fisdom. Welcome to the panel, everyone, and thanks for being with us today. And with that, I would like to pass the mic to our session moderator, Vikrant, who will take the discussions forward. Over to you, Vikrant.
Can I go across with all of you and just, if you can highlight one or two main things about your firm or your platform and how you are using technology as a differentiator? Yeah? So, can we go with you first, Vidushi?
So, Mitra Money, we are a wealth management firm and will be soon launching in August all-in-one digital platform, which will make it, which will give people access to a complete comprehensive suite of products and also very customized advice to make it very engaging for them to save, invest, and grow their money. So that's where we are on wealth management and soon going to launch our tech platform for people. So
Great.
thank you.
Subbu, can we go next with you?
Yeah, so Fisdom is a digital wealth management platform. We help customers access a variety of financial products like across savings, investments, and protection to completely digital means. We want to use technology to help people use these products via simplicity, make them more accessible, and build trust. So build a consumer product, but the way we reach end customers is by both technology as well as business integration with established financial institutions like banks and NBFCs. So we build a consumer product but reach customers through B2B2C partnerships. So that's a bit about Fisdom.
Sure. Okay. Quickly moving on, Saugata, would you like to talk about CashRich? Briefly. Yeah.
So CashRich is a simple and easy to use mutual fund investment app. The idea is how do we provide the right set of tools and right framework so that people don't make the common investing mistakes and they are able to transact everything digitally. So the app has a intuitive UI UX, but more importantly, there is also financial research which goes behind the background to help people take the right investment decisions and avoid certain risky investments and avoid certain mistakes. Also, we have developed an algorithm called Dynamic SIP, which helps them to manage their asset allocation easily and automatically. So, that's what we provide, and mostly we acquire our customers digitally, so people can download the CashRich app, and then the account setup, everything is done digitally. So that's about the CashRich investment app.
Great. Abhishek, I know you come from conventional business which must be using technology. Anything that you want to highlight about them? Everybody knows IIFL, but anything worth sharing here?
Yeah, no, sure. I think primarily on the HNI and ultra HNI space, we are sizably big. That's what our market is. But we are also a manufacturing unit. We have a sizably big IIFL AMC also, where we have all the three products, our mutual funds, PMS, and AIF. And that's open for all the investors.
Great. Thank you. And lastly, Vineet, would you like to talk about what Crystal.ai is doing, considering your focus is slightly more global?
Yeah, so we are a digital version of a private bank. We primarily focus on enabling investors get access to global investments across the world. And our primary focus is on the affluent and the emerging HNI segment of customers. We try to bring access to this segment, what private banks make available for $5 to $10 million HNI clients. So that's where we use technology to make it more accessible for this particular segment of customers.
Great, thank you. So I guess we'll jump into the main panel conversation, having known you guys as the founder as well as your companies respectively. I was looking at the news about Robinhood IPO and successful, and that's where I thought I'll start the panel conversation with that. So the overall success of how that got listed and the retail investors who were supporting the meme stock trading, the frenzy raised $2.1 billion in its first IPO. And the company was obviously supporting cryptocurrencies and stocks such as in the gaming space. Their user base for Robinhood has also increased drastically from 11.7 million at the end of December last year to 21.5 at the end of June, with around almost 90% increase in their base in last 6 months. And their IPO has been valued at around $38.1 billion, so around 2.2 lakh crore in INR, which makes it even sometimes stronger than the traditional businesses like, Charles Schwab. So with that context, I wanted to ask, initial thoughts, to Vidushi and probably Vineet, you covering Vidushi, the domestic side, and probably Vineet could cover the international side. So how do you see this trend for wealth management platforms in India going forward? Any message from you?
So wealth management, if we actually look at the world of investing, used to be very confined to a particular set of investor earlier, because either people used to lack knowledge about the financial instruments, or the processes used to be so complicated. And with these wealth management platforms coming in, they are simplifying the process for people to do their investments. It's become more accessible to every set of investor to start some or other sort of investments. Secondly, also if you see, there is an entire new set of investors which have emerged, which we call millennial, which they are used to of booking a cab or ordering a food just by touch of their screens, and they need similar sort of an experience when it comes to their financial wealth. So I think these wealth management platforms are able to provide that on-demand service to the new age investors. They are able to provide an integrated view of their wealth, and that's where the industry is seeing the rise, the wealth management tech platforms. So, and they're making processes more transparent as well, if we really have to look at it, and saving a lot of time for people, which traditionally used to be, in terms of trading and investing, used to be a cumbersome process. So I think it's gaining momentum. The industry is growing. The tech platforms in the wealth management space are growing, and let's see from here how it goes further. Yeah.
Sure. And Vineet, do you see any trend in the global wealth management space and activities from India that you would like to mention equally?
Yeah, so Indian consumers, right, especially the millennials, right, so they are becoming more and more aware of global products, right, and similarly, that's the case with investments as well. They are becoming more and more aware of it. Like you said, Robinhood, everybody recognizes. People have aspired to get access to Tesla, GameStop, cryptos. They're all household names, and they are very frequently coming up in discussions. Mm-hmm. People have also started becoming very aspirational in nature, right? So there used to be a day when people used to aspire to get access to an iPhone or an Android device, right? So that is very common now. People now want to get access to those companies who own these and make available these products, right? So they want to own shares of these. They want to have a piece of the ownership in Apple, Amazon, Zoom, so on and so forth, right? So those are some of the trends that we are seeing, where global wealth management is increasingly picking up in India. Post-COVID, we are seeing this particular pace accelerate because the global markets recovered far sooner than the India domestic markets. And people wanted to kind of get a share of that pie. So there was a kind of a FOMO behavior that started post-COVID, and people started really wanted to get access to it. Initially, it was very trading kind of a behavior. People wanted to get access to a stock of Amazon or a Tesla, right? But over the period of last 6 to 9 months, we are seeing a behavior change, where people want global investments as a part of their overall diversified portfolio. And that's a maturity that we are seeing in the portfolios of people, in the minds of people, right? Today, the global investment is very small, just about 2 to 3% of someone's portfolio. But we are expecting it to grow to about 15 to 20% of a typical affluent client's portfolio in the next 5 years or so.
Sure. So both of you talked about, millennials and how that would probably support some of the growth in future. I wanted to also look at how access to media for millennials, access to technology, and sometime a collective wisdom of how they think at a young age, whether in college or through their social groups or through community-based thinking that they all do, that is driving. So obviously with them, they have a faster adoption to technology. They are more liberal and less risk averse in their decision making. Is it changing their selection of what kind of product they might be choosing or what kind of things that they are taking? And, and if that is changing how the overall portfolio would look like in 10 to 15 years when these young guys in large numbers would become probably a customer for all of us. So I'll take this question to Saugata probably and ask him about how CashRich is supporting some of this youth-driven economy, and is he seeing some of these changes in the consumer pattern in the last few years?
Yeah, sure. So India is not only a young country from a demographic standpoint, but also if we see the AUM to GDP ratio to measure the mutual fund penetration in India, that is also quite low. Like when we started our journey a few years back, it used to be less than 10%, and now it is around 15%. But still, that's quite low compared to the Western economies and some of the larger economies where it is upwards of 75% or 90%. So AUM to GDP is quite low in India, and even though the industry has seen a CAGR of more than 20% in the last 5 years, there is a lot of scope to grow. So that's like just to highlight how much potential is there in this market. Second point is the the traditional products, whether it is insurance and investment mixed together or fixed deposits, they have not generated much return in the past, and going forward also people don't want to put their money parked at 5%, and they get, especially the young people, they get excited with returns from crypto and other stocks which goes up very fast. So that's something which will change their behavior. However, one thing that we as an industry and as a company also we always try to protect is that if you want to realize the long-term value of these investors and they stay invested, they shouldn't meet a market accident in such a manner that it becomes fatal to them. And that's where some of the risk management practices within the platform becomes very important. So I'll give you an example. Last year, around April 2020, we had seen Franklin Templeton, they had shut down 6 debt funds. Now, when such an accident happens, it creates a bad impression and a bad experience for new users who were told you could withdraw the money anytime. And that's where, some of them then, don't want to continue. So what we did was, much before that accident happened, around February of 2019, is more than 1 year before that incident, because we constantly monitor the underlying portfolio. So we identified that risk and we removed all Franklin Templeton debt funds from our app. So none of our users got affected when the problem took place. So that's why it is very important that fintech is not just UI, UX and design of technology. Fintech also has a finance part. So financial research is also important so that people actually continue investing for a long term and benefit from the effects of compounding.
That's a very interesting perspective you've given, and considering I come from risk management background, I can appreciate it hugely. I've spent more than 2 decades doing that for large financial enterprise. And if you are able to do that with the help of technology for consumers, nothing better than that. I'll take the conversation forward with Abhishek on the same line. Abhishek, retail investors are now almost demanding an access to similar asset class which were generally offered to HNIs or affluent customers. How is IIFL trying to deal with it? And you're a conventional wealth management platform, very strong in business. How do you see these trends emerging, and are you using technology to deal with it proactively?
Sure. No, I acknowledge actually what you're saying, Vikrant, is completely true, right? The demand is becoming higher and higher, and this is also becoming higher because there's an overall shift in the society. So I feel one point which Vidushi was saying was related to the process complication which used to exist. But I feel also culturally we have seen a significant shift. We have moved as a society from a saving culture to an investing culture. We want our money to grow. Gone are those days, as was being said by Basu, right, saying that FD or real estate, for example, real estate as an asset class is not something which is attractive anymore. We want something which should be liquid. We want something which is flexible, seeing high returns. And that's what is the demand which is coming for everyone. We have seen a huge change ourselves, right? Debt, or I would say direct equity and debt were two asset classes which in a way were packaged through mutual funds and available to the investors. But now everyone also wants to have little more complex product structures, which are like PMS and AIFs also being available, right? We do know, everyone recognizes, regulators recognize these are little high risk, high return products. But interestingly, to share with you some figures, and this is primarily where the people who are retail investors moving into affluent and wanting to get these products, SEBI increased the limit of a PMS from 25 lakhs to 50 lakhs as a minimum investment. But that is, everyone would have thought would actually drop the market of PMS. It has gone other way. Over 2021, we have seen a significant increase. The market of PMS has got double. The overall investments have got double. So there are more and more people who are wanting to invest in it. Now, what brings this is, this brings a big challenge for some of us as conventional AMCs or conventional wealth managers. We need to now focus a lot on technology, because earlier you were looking at clients who were 10 crores, 15 crores. Now these 50 lakh clients who are coming more and more, you need to get onboarded. So the number of tickets or the number of volumes are increasing. And that's where a quick onboarding, a quick servicing becomes very important. And those are the solutions which everyone is aiming for at this stage. A very efficient, quick digital onboarding, even on PMS, which you would have not thought of probably 3 years back, is today the most critical thing. And every PMS house in the industry today is working on it. In AIs, we are looking at getting people to digitally sign the whole document, which is a 1 crore, minimum 1 crore investment product, is also something which people are very keen to sign on, and they want to sign it digitally completely, and they're comfortable signing digitally.
So in your question, in your explanation which you were giving, I picked up one point which was about increasing population which is coming, and there is obviously servicing that you need to do about whether they're onboarding or ongoing servicing. So your revenue to cost of acquisition or revenue to servicing ratio may not have gone in your favor, but you have large number of users which are coming on your platform. How do you see this change? Does it change anything from a consumer behavior or your strategy for the consumers?
So one is, see, we have to consciously start recognizing that our traditional approach of servicing, right, which was face-to-face, is not going to work, right? So we are moving into a very hybrid structure, which is face-to-face plus a very digitally supported servicing structure, which is both about onboarding, execution, and servicing throughout the life cycle of the product.
Sure. Okay, that's great. And obviously we spoke about how Indian wealth management space is still evolving and is a beast, looking at the underserved market that we have, and how overall in the developed economy the wealth management household is around 50% in the US or in developed market, whereas in India we still have only 2% of the entire population which is invested in the financial asset class. So there is still a lot of upside available. I'll take this to Subbu, and so I'll ask this question to him. Subbu, how is your firm Fisdom doing in last 2 years? Your platform transacts in insurance, in mutual fund, pension funds, and amongst few things. How's the overall impact of economy as well as impact of COVID in last 2 years, which we should see generally and in the larger context too?
Yeah, so a couple of points before I address the specific question.
Sure.
I think the big impact of the positive trend that we've seen for all the broader wealth management industry is fall in interest rates. I think the reason why, what Abhishek mentioned, in spite of increasing in minimum amount, PMS inflows have significantly increased, is because the alternative is keeping money at 4.5%-5%. And if India were to be a developed economy, at some stage our interest rates have to go to those interest rates, which is 1 to 2%. So we were at 10%. One of us could get an FD at 10%. Even in 2011, 2012, we could get a 9-10% fixed deposit. Today, there is no one giving you that rate. It's 5%, 4.5% by the big bank. I think that lack of alternative in terms of what's happening in the banking deposit base, I think that's a huge transfer of assets from keeping in bank deposits to wealth. Of course, the real estate, demonetization, all of this is also helping. And lastly, the whole, millennial generational shift, right? I think there is a clear, perceptible increase in risk-taking ability across the board. And this is something that we could look at the data around, although unconfirmed data about the number of crypto investors we have in India, or the kind of reception an IPO like Zomato, or for that matter, the one that went public today, got, where I think some of these are indications that while there are structural reasons why there's so much happening, there's also demographic reasons why we are seeing, and to me, this is a 10-year sort of a trend. This is not a 1 to 2 year sort of a phenomenon. We're going to see this for the next many, many decades. Now, specifically, Vikrant, about how we've been doing, I think our focus is, we don't take it to millennials. Our customer is a 35 to 45-year-old customer, 70% tier 2, tier 3 towns, because as I said earlier, we work with banks. We work with banks and financial institutions who have stronger footprint in a tier 2, tier 3 towns. For example, we work with banks like regional banks like Karnataka Bank, City Union Bank, who have a very, very strong presence in specific geographies. And what we've seen is there's an immense amount of interest and uptake in, wanting to access capital markets. And the reasons are what I talked about. So I think the tier 2, tier 3 markets will offer huge potential for everyone in this panel over the next couple of years. For us, we work with banks. COVID, in that sense, was a sort of a positive boost, because more and more banks are on the digitization wave, and we are one of the ways for them to digitize some parts of their business of offering wealth management solutions to their customer. And also, customers are also asking digital solutions. So, nobody wants a brick and mortar solution. Digital first is the approach that is today being taken. Earlier, we thought it was only millennials who want digital solutions, but COVID has made sure that anyone who is between 20 to 45 years of age, as on date, will first look to take a digital solution. If that's not available, possibly look at alternatives. So by and large, this whole, the three vectors that I talked about has helped us significantly, Vikrant.
Very interesting perspective, Subbu. Thank you. Considering you also come from venture capital background and we were talking about potential size, huge growth opportunity, this information backdrop, how do you see this as opportunity for wealth tech companies and a startup ecosystem for India?
Yeah, look, I think the market is just beginning. You mentioned less than 2% of Indians have access to capital markets in some form. Less than 1% of Indians have access to any form of formal protection/insurance products. So my view is this whole financialization of savings and financialization of physical assets. This is not a 1 to 2 year trend. This is a 10-year, 20-year trend. The fact that Indians have stored their wealth and deposits in gold and real estate is not today's story. If you look at any BCG report on India, this would be the same story in 1995, 2000, 2010, 2015, 2020. I think what's really changed is just the demographics and the digital, the tailwind that we're seeing. I think that will force people, will take this trend for the next sort of 10 years. What is the exact percentage we will land up with? We don't know. But it is fair to assume that there are at least, in the next 5 years, there will be at least 100 million people who will want to access wealth management solutions digitally, and wealth management in a sort of a broad sort of a framework. And that's a fairly strong market size, right? I mean, that's the size of many economies. That's a positive. On the question side, because as as an investor, people always think in terms of the pros and the cons and the risks, right? Just like every other economy, the wealth management industry here also will go through its own pulls and pressures of regulations, disintermediation, cost reduction, competition. So those are the things that we all as operators and ecosystem we have to deal with. But I would say we are in the midst of a decade-long trend of financialization of savings and physical assets.
So that's a great landscape of vectors that you covered. But on a lifetime value of a customer, do you think that will increase over a period of time from Indian customers?
Absolutely. So as I said, there are two factors affecting here. One is the customer, doing more with you. So that's a positive where the lifetime value will increase. But the reality is also that in the financial services world, the take rates or the what you can charge the customer over a period of time will
Would
only
also
go
reduce.
down.
Yeah.
With more and more proliferation of low cost passive investing, regulator doing some initiatives. So those are the one is customer becoming more and more attached to the platform and doing more. So that will increase the lifetime value of the customer. The other one is the pricing pressure that will reduce. If I add the two, typically if you see any economy, the second one always accompanies the first one. So typically falling pricing will invariably or usually results in enhancing volumes. To that extent, even if you add the two or multiply the two rather, the lifetime value of the customers will continue to increase over the next many years.
Sure. No, good perspective. I'll bring it to the to my panelist in the room. Rishi, you've started your business in during the COVID time, right? How has been the trends affecting your business, or what are the the trends you are currently dealing with?
So I think, is it audible?
Yeah.
So we started during the COVID times. I think, like everyone mentioned, like people want more digital solutions, right? And automation into the industry is very important, where people are looking like how you can advise them or guide them to do their investments. So one side we see during the how India is growing, like people are looking for some sort of automated tools. If we talk about the people who are entering into this world. In terms of their investing, but at the same time people also look for some human touch which can help them, guide them about the financial instruments. So India still, if we look at, has been there traditionally, where they want some sort of a human touch which can make them understand the level of the risk which they can take and then create a portfolio. So I think overall trend, if we see in India, the automated, we are moving towards automation, but still I think what we saw during this time, there'll be a hybrid model which is going to evolve, where people do need some sort of a guidance from the experts as well as the automation which is required. So I think in our scheme of things, we do have a setup on the wealth management firm where we create portfolios for the clients, and we have that sort of a research in place. But on the tech platform is where we are creating some automated rules which will help millennial to just input the figures in terms of the tenor, the risk and all, and it will throw up a diversified basket of investment suggestions.
Sure.
So that's where we are seeing the volumes will play a role, like we will be able to capture the volumes by the means of our automatic suggestion engine, recommendation engine, which we have built on our platform. And simultaneously, people can explore various mutual funds and then they can do the investment. So this is the start. We'll be launching in other products as well as we move forward. And simultaneously, to cater to the section of HNIs or people who need a specific guidance on the investment, personalized portfolios or a bigger amount, that still I think in India right now needs to be managed by a people prefer a particular human touch to be there when it comes to a bigger amount. So we'll work in both the models there. We'll have HNIs whom we have expertise to create the portfolios, as well as reach out to the masses by way of our automated investments and smart portfolios, which we are creating on our platform.
Sure. So that's tech enabled, not necessarily robot driven.
So Robo will be there in terms of generating the portfolio for the client and then leading to the execution.
Sure.
So AI ML is something, artificial intelligence, which will take some time for us to reach to that level. But yeah, Robo solution in terms of creating a diversified portfolio basis the risk appetite of the client is already in place, which we'll be launching.
So on all the panelists who are with us, is any one of you literally offering and expertising in robo advisory as a service line? And this is an open question to any of you. You can unmute.
Sure, I can add. So I feel 2 points here to add, Vikrant. So one is, I feel the awareness on the cost is very, very high on the side of clients. So direct investments, in a way, across asset classes becomes one of the biggest factors. So that's one. And I'll come to the robo advisory. So I feel that consciousness is where is across the spectrum, right? I feel everyone now understands that at what cost are they coming in, and they want to be very clear and they want to keep it as low. I feel that brings in a lot more, saying that we have to move into a subscription-based model where we are regularly engaged with the client. We can't look at an upfront transaction fee kind of a model in place. The second is to help construct the portfolio. I feel there is I agree with Vidushi that there's going to be a hybrid approach. You take a or you take a portfolio analytical tool which helps you dissect the portfolio, keep it ready, bring it to a certain level, and then there is a support or expert available who's able to explain the construct a little more and get the comfort to the client. So that's what we do. So we have a subscription-based approach completely where the fee is all the investments are direct, and that's we offer as our RFL1 offering to our clients, called as RFL1, all encompassing RFL1. And then again to this, we add a very strong analytical engine which helps clients come out with good balanced portfolios which they can invest.
Sure. Okay. And I'm now picking up few, fintech trends which are going around, and I'm trying to see if there are any impact which we see coming from those fintech trends to the wealth tech arena. So voice-enabled payment is one thing which we are generally seeing, and I wanted to direct this question to Vineet, considering he comes from the product background. So Vineet, Siri and Alexa, are they ready to invest on our behalf in India? Are we seeing that trend? Do you see that possibility? People calling Alexa, please suggest me are you creating any of the voice recognition product for Indian market?
So I think interesting use case, but we are not yet really making our product ready in that direction. What we are focusing on is really more intelligence into the core algorithms itself, but definitely something with time. It may be a good way to interact there. And it's a new evolution in terms of the entire user experience direction, right? Which was more screen-based till now, taking it to the voice level. I think it's still, for the time being, more focused around consumerish applications, right? So like music is a classic example where you can start leveraging that. But I think into more serious things like finance, my take is that it will still take some more time.
Sure, and they may not do the entire trading. They might still give a suggestion to you, saying analyze these trends on my behalf and give me a summary. That summary could still come to your handheld device, and you make transaction decision based on what you read. They might still act on your instruction, not necessarily do a trading fully on your behalf. I was asking this because we saw a CAGR ratio of around 16.8% for voice recognition based products. And with a large volume today, we're talking about a $10.7 billion purely around voice recognition market, and that's where I was asking. But sorry, Abhishek, you had a point.
No, sorry, yeah, I was just sharing. So in fact, to share with you, we actually had done a deep stick of this same use case around a year and a half back. Okay. And that was just before pandemic. So we were very successful in bringing video statements to our clients. We realized our PDF statements were not readable. We converted it into a quick video, which was of 120 seconds. Clients started appreciating it. We said, how about taking it to the next level of Alexa? And we started doing some deep dive. And we did a quick interview. And some of our clients said, you have to understand on which clientele are you trying to ask, right? The people who have Alexa, who are using it, how would in today's setup of Indian home, right, which has people across various financial sectors. So I have my maid, my driver, others sitting, and I'm going to ask him, what does my portfolio look like today on Alexa? And it's going to play in the room. It's not going to happen. So a very interesting feedback. He said that, Abhishek, we were doing a check with all our clients. He said, okay, let's pick up some 10, 15 clients, take a feedback. And a lot of them gave this feedback, saying that, how are you going to manage the privacy and the confidentiality of this information? Saying what it should play, what it should not play.
Sure.
So that's something which is going to become very important. So we could not actually honestly go ahead with the project, because when we started getting this feedback, we said, okay, let's go ahead and pick up some other use cases and other journeys first and bring this later. But we were very excited initially with it.
Yeah, it might ask you a question saying, are you really sure, can I share this openly? And you give the answer. Anyway, sure. Moving on. So I wanted to similarly pick up a trend on what we are seeing in insurance, where there is a lot of focus on micro insurance or insurance tech coming in picture. And I wanted to direct this to Saugata. Saugata, do you see any of those trends around, tech-enabled acquisition for insurance or micro insurance? And does it give you any other additional dimension to the wealth platforms to think on those aspects?
Yeah, sure. Actually, because of COVID, a lot of people have realized the importance of insurance, and just when COVID has started, a lot of micro insurance products around COVID protection had started, like apps which are traditionally not in insurance, they embedded that product in their journeys. So somebody would be doing a payment for some other use case, but then there'll be a micro insurance product related to COVID, and so that kind of started this, started the growth of this particular product. And apart from micro insurance, just the overall concept and need of insurance has also been amplified because of COVID. People have seen a lot of like deaths in and around their family or friends, and also health related issues. So fundamentally, the need for protection has been now like properly communicated to the end users. Now they really want. So earlier it used to be a lot of push to sell insurance product, but now there is a demand which is automatically coming from the customer saying that, I think I'm not well protected, and hence I'll need to buy and look for products. And if they are embedded in the journey, or if there is a micro insurance product, that also helps. But overall, the need for insurance products has gone up.
But since there are many digital insurance companies are directly entering into market, do you also see them as a competition?
What we would like to do is actually partner with them and make it a complementary product, which we can also offer in some way, like maybe include them in our journeys. And because we typically keep the investment and insurance separate, so we don't mix them, but as a customer acquisition channel or for upselling, cross-selling purposes, that can be useful. But when we traditionally, do the investment management and planning, that is separate from the insurance product planning. That's mainly for the protection and risk management.
Sure. Okay. Great. Another trend which I am seeing and increasingly, which is about cross-border payments. There are a lot of remittances now happening, and the ability to move and transfer money easily and economically across geography has also increased. So with that, I wanted to take this back again to our Crystal team. Vineet, do you see any of these trends aiding your wealth management businesses additionally?
I think overall cross-border remittances in that space, right? Technology has significantly transformed how that entire domain is. But unfortunately for us, given the regulatory constraints, right, it has not been a plus. Because for global investment purposes, right, money has to go through a AD2 bank where it's primarily paper-based still. That has been a bit of a challenge. So that's why money transfer globally is still not as smooth as UPI payments for specific to us, while remittance companies, right, they have been doing great. They are making it seamless. For us, at least for the foreseeable future, for next 3 to 5 years, we have had some informal discussions as well. There is a policy decision not to change the process. That's why it's not a big plus. Having said that, even though the process itself is still paper-based, right, there are a lot of other auxiliary things like improved logistics, which is making it more seamless, the money process of money transfer. It's helping, it's getting better, but overall, the money transfer process globally for investments will still be paper-based for the foreseeable transfer.
Okay, thank you. I have a next trend which is around the regulatory changes and how technology is supporting the regulation through the RegTech solution. So we have an increased focus on data privacy. There is a very increased focus from customer on KYC, CDD, EDD, enhanced due diligence, and transparency issues are also. And because of which we are seeing some regulatory solutions coming in the market, but we are also seeing regulators getting stiff on what do they need. How does some of this add any other dimension to a wealth management platforms? Abhishek, would you like to take this, considering you come from technology background?
So I feel I agree, regulator is becoming tough, but regulator is also very open to new suggestions is what we have seen. And I feel we have seen during the whole pandemic phase, they changed number of regulations. Almost 4 new regulations were brought in place to facilitate and bring e-sign capability in place, doing away with in-person verification if you are taking an e-sign in place. At the same time, they've also realized that the way photographs were being taken as a part of digital KYC, what all actions would be brought in place. So I feel regulator one is very, very aware, and at the same time also being accommodative while being tough. Right? So he wants to ensure that the right AML standards are being followed, but they also are happy to see every new tech solution that you bring to them. They're happy to hear to you. So that's very, very receptive, and that's actually bringing a number of players in the market. And all wealth managers today, to share with you, are actually working with one or the other new RegTech solution available to ensure that the onboarding experience becomes easier. Because that is the first step where you want to ensure that the client becomes happy and you convert the client fastest as possible. We as traditional wealth managers today are targeting saying that in under 15 minutes, we should actually have the client in place and he should be able to do an investment. Okay. And not just in simple mutual funds or direct equity, but even in complex structures like PMS and AIF. So those are the kinds of KPIs that we are trying to work.
So you are saying you can do an account opening in 15 minutes end to end?
So that's what we are aiming, honestly. Still, there are some challenges. So like, for example, power of attorney as a document which is required for some of the structures still requires physical signature to be in place. The IT Act has not gone through that amendment. But a lot of other places where the Aadhaar-based e-sign is acceptable actually helps you complete the whole transaction quickly. And plus the number of APIs which are being now exposed by so many regulatory bodies and quasi-regulatory bodies helps you fetch the information much faster.
Sure. And are you open to use those regulatory RegTech solution provider as a part of your business these days?
Completely. In fact, we are hunting. I'll tell you, there are a lot which are there in the market, and you want to also ensure that you pick the right one so that your journey gets completed correctly.
In fact, when we launched our fund, and I'm just doing a detouring about Succeed Innovation Fund that I handle. When we introduced one sector, it was purely around security, authentication, and RegTech. And people, they weren't really sure why we are picking and choosing RegTech as one of the focus area. And we thought that was the reason because of the increased digitization in the fintech journey. This would be important. There is a huge focus from regulator on various compliances, and a lot of that would come very handy. So I'm glad to hear that coming from you. Another trend that I would like to talk about is a pipeline of tech IPOs, right? Whether it's in India, successful IPO last week. We started the session with Robinhood IPO, and there are a few more in pipeline, and there is an increased inclination towards people to apply in those IPOs, right? Are this trend catching up, as a part of your customers' requirement? Are they reaching out to you and are they asking you if you could enable them to participate in IPOs more easily as a wealth management proposition? And that's a question you guys could answer. Any of you can pick it up based on your inclination, so it's an open question.
One thing I can add here is while our platform doesn't help specifically in IPOs, we are seeing a lot of interest in pre-IPO stage companies because people are realizing that given so much heat around IPOs, right, they hardly get any allocation. So they want to get into the company about 18 to 24 months time before the company becomes IPO ready. And that's a trend we are seeing increasingly accelerate over the last 6 months. So about we started this kind of business about 1 year ago, where we started with one such deal around pre-IPO, and now on the platform we have at any point in time 4 to 6 such opportunities available, and all of them are getting grabbed so soon. Within a few days, everything is taken up by our customers.
And how are they getting traded if they are not going through their IPO?
So they will hold it till the time it goes to IPO. So that is expected to happen in the next 12 to 24 months, right? So and then there will be a 6 months holding lock-in period. Post it becomes it gets traded. But people are willing to take that level of risk, given that in IPOs getting allocation is becoming very challenging.
Yeah, this you actually taken my next question. I was thinking of asking that, like, we started to have real estate assets getting, picked up by people in Fragment, and similarly, are we doing something for angel funds or for angel investment activities in startups also? And if wealth management platforms are coming forward, and if we definitely have that opportunity, venture capital funds like ourselves would be very happy to start looking at customers in different shape and form, working with you guys too. So happy to have chat with some of you on taking that forward. Probably last couple of questions before we formally look at closing. and this probably could be for Sugata. Another trend which we saw is about crypto asset becoming mainstream. Is that possible? Are we reaching anywhere closer, or is still it is a noise as a parallel economy? Where do you see that shaping up?
So what we are seeing is like some youngsters are looking at the social media sites like Twitter, or some of them see some videos, etc., and then they get interested and put their money in Dogecoin, and they want to become a millionaire overnight. So that's a trend which is going on. Also, there are some sophisticated investors who are looking at some more data and trying to probably buy the dip when Bitcoin or Ethereum goes down, and maybe allocate 1 or 2% of their portfolio. So some money from gold, which is a traditional asset where we store asset which which is considered a store of value. Instead of gold, some part of that money is being parked in Bitcoin or Ethereum or some more prominent cryptocurrency. And then obviously there are some people who are interested in just trading and getting rich fast. Now that can end up with a bad experience also. But the real investors who are thinking long term, there is a use case for these cryptocurrencies, and for putting a small amount of allocation is kind of not a bad idea probably. I can't advise, I'm not an expert in cryptos, but what I have seen is that people are considering it as a replacement of the gold and silver, because we already have enough gold and silver. It's not that we are going to sell it and buy more. Buy these cryptos. It's just additional capital, instead of going back to gold and silver, could go into the crypto. So there is a use case for that.
Wonderful. Okay, so I guess we covered various layers and dimensions of wealth management. I would just like to formally close by asking one question common to all of you. So if you can take 30 seconds each on what's next and how do you win in this space, what's your and company's philosophy going to be for a couple of years? Probably you can start with you, Sugata, and then go around the room.
Sure. So I think our focus will be on the risk management aspect, which I mentioned earlier also, because what happens typically in these sort of bull markets is that there is a lot of excitement, then there is euphoria, and at some stage the bubble pops, and then people again get into a bear market where they don't like the investment experience, and all the effort that we put to acquire these users over a period of time, it can just take a month for people to then have a very negative opinion about financial products, financial markets, and then there'll be all these articles and tweets how FD is doing better than all the funds. So we don't want to lose the customers that we acquire during this bull market when the bear market starts, and hence we want to position the portfolios in such a way that they are relatively protected, and people are psychologically they are able to withstand those kind of events, and that's how we want to use behavioral finance in our journeys. It's not just traditional finance, but just how behavioral finance concepts can be used in developing the product.
So fundamental practices going strong, using technology too. Great. Okay, moving to Abhishek.
I feel trust is the biggest part. I would say trust plays the biggest factor, and that's what every organization is trying to build upon. That's what even trust was in a way trying to hint on. And in that trust also comes data confidentiality and information security. So as we more and more digitize every journey and every platform, I feel there's also this parallel regular news which keeps coming about various data getting leaked. And that's a question which keeps coming to everyone's mind, and for my mind as a CTO, right, at how are we ensuring that?
Sure. Wonderful. Good focus. Thank you. And Vineet, how do you make your customer win through this process?
Yeah, I think what we are trying to do is build out a sustainable business. So we are there. We want to be with our customers for the next 5 to 10 years or even longer, especially the client segment that we focus on. They are looking at us from a long-term perspective. And technology for us is a way to really help build this business in a sustainable manner with focus on unit economics. So that's where, like Vidushi mentioned earlier, right? So automation is a key thing in this space, not just for us, but for everyone. And really that is a way to enable better unit economics and sustainability of the business. Finally, it all goes back to the customer, yes. But the core business has to be strong, and technology is helping us get there.
Sure. If you're sustainable and unit economics positive, that will ensure we are passing through even a bad phase and always rapidly growing in a good phase. Yeah, moving on to Subbu. Subbu, how do you see this shaping up and how are you making your customer win?
Yeah, I think, as we said, the market is really underpenetrated. For us, technology can play a significant role in expanding access to wealth management solutions to significantly larger population in a trustworthy manner. And I think our business is going to be oriented towards just doing that. How can we provide access to more customers in a simplified and a trustworthy manner? So that's, we believe technology will solve the problem significantly, as we've seen in the last couple of years.
Good to see how you guys are bringing the focus on trust regularly. So closing it finally with Vidushi in the room, any closing remarks from you also on how you want to shape up as you are in the formative years of your business?
So I think from our perspective also, like Subbu mentioned, we are also focusing majorly on building that trust sort of a thing for our clients. So like we all agreed that more of people are trying to venture into the equity side of the market, seeing the bull run. But still, if we look at, people are not sure what sort of portfolios to be created. So all these platforms which are present there, they may provide them access and automation to do the transactions. So how differently we are trying to create is creating a diversified portfolio for them in an automatic manner. So it's more of a client-centric approach rather than giving a particular client, understanding their risk behaviors and all, and then making a diversified portfolio to them. So I think that's the strategy where we will try to build the trust, the sort of selection of funds to begin with, as we are starting with mutual funds, that we'll do for them is where we will stand out, I think, from the players, and will build our strong proposition over there. And that's where we want to grow. And another segment of HNIs is what we continue to focus on.
Great. So technology to transparency to trust. That's the summary of our session today. Amazing. Thank you, co-panelists. I hope you enjoyed the interaction. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Amazing wealth of information and experience sitting in this panel. You guys have been running it successfully, paving through all the challenges and opportunity in this market. And I look forward to building this association further in several other business dimensions. So have a great rest of the day.
Where there is life, there is hope, there is meaning. But life has its downs as much as its ups. Life is about challenges. Life is about opportunities. Time for joy, time for celebration, and time to introspect. Thankfully, in every one of life's moments, and even beyond life itself, there's LIC. Where there is life, there's always LIC. Zindagi ke saath bhi, zindagi ke baad bhi.